The reason why job dissatisfaction keeps happening is because you're not able to progress in your career. And for example, where I work now is just a manager, and then you have employees treated equally on the same level. And that's what I'm going to say, because there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to understand that it's very hard to progress. And that's what some people may want, and that's why they're dissatisfied. Because, for example, you may be good at one role, but because you're good at one role, they keep you in a box. And it's not just them, but you start to believe it as well. And that's why it becomes dissatisfying, because you start to do things automatically. You start daydreaming. You start thinking, when is the day going to end? And when you start questioning things, you start saying, am I good enough? Is the work that I'm doing even enough as well? Because sometimes you may be doing enough work, but then you feel like you're overworked. And when you're overworked, it means that you're burning so much energy as well that you're exhausted, you're mentally drained, but then you're physically in a job that's physically demanding. So I'll give you an example in my case. So earlier in the summer when there was a heat wave where things were really hot, it was really hard for you to just stand around in one spot. That was what it was like for my job for like a while. Because, okay, my bad. So when it comes to job dissatisfaction, for example, I'll give you my story. It's not really like a dramatic or sad story, but I'm just going to say it. I realized that it made the job a lot harder. And that's what I'm going to say, because there's some things that are out of your control. You can't seem to move past it because you're focused on that rather than the work. And I'm just going to say this, for example, because when I start making plans with people, it's normally on my day off. So that way I can really focus on my job when I am working. And when I'm not working, I can then pay attention to other things as well. So it's not just really a job, but also extracurricular activities that I can do. I can improve my learning by going to the gym. And when I go to the gym, it's one of those good habits I had throughout the year. Because before, when I wasn't going to the gym, I realized that I spent my money on snacks. I didn't really have the best exercise, the best diet, and it really leads to negative moods. So when you want something and you want to push yourself, by going to the gym, that is one thing that really helped me to then be in a job, even if you don't like it, or even if you don't like the things that you have to do. But the one thing that is positive about the job that I'm in is about the people being supportive. Because if the people aren't supportive, then not only me, but other people might have left. So after watching back on my own videos, because sometimes I watch my own videos to come up with new ideas. But let me just get back to what I was trying to say. So for example, when it comes to you being in your job, you're going to realize that you're working with the same people, but then when you're working with different people, sometimes you might not be working as hard because you're distracted. And that's what I'm going to say, because while you're at work, you are building relationships with people where people start to trust you more. And not only that, you start to find things in common with people. But sometimes when you're at work, because you're there to work, sometimes people can distract you. And it's not that you get in trouble, but you're just expected to work. And that's what I'm going to say, because it's not all bad, but sometimes when you do want to talk to people and then you can't really talk to them because a manager's there, for example, it then becomes like a problem. And I'm going to say that because you might not be able to talk to them outside of work because you don't really have their details. And that's what I'm going to say, because it's not really the point I'm trying to make, but I'm just going to say that. But I'm just having two more things to say. When you're working overtime, it can be an inconvenience at times. And the reason why working overtime can be an issue is because you do it because you have to, and sometimes because you don't want to. Because when you're trying to make a living, overtime, it pays more. But at the same time, depending on what time you work, it could pay more. I'm just going to say that because when it comes to working overtime, you're going to be standing or you're going to be sitting a lot more. And when it comes to that, it's because you start thinking when is going to be the next break. You start working overtime. You start talking to people that you don't normally talk to because you don't see them often unless you're working overtime. And that's when it becomes dissatisfying, because when you're working overtime for such a long period, it becomes exhausting. But sometimes as well, you know, when you're in a job and you have something you don't like to do, I may have said this in another part, but you can't really complain. And sometimes you have to suck it up. So there'll be times where you think it's boring. There'll be times where you have conversations with people that you don't really want to. But then let me just say this, because you can't really say what you're going through every single day. Otherwise, if you keep saying it, people are just going to tell you to leave. I'm going to say this, when you're working in a job and it becomes dissatisfying, it's because you start to exaggerate what you're really good at. And when people find out that you're not really good at something, it can be dissatisfying. Because you know when you say you're good at something, but then you're not, because you're trying to impress the people there, when they find out that you're not good at something, it can be humiliating. And I do get it, people won't say out loud that you fumbled this, you did this wrong. But in a way, you know deep down that people are performing better than you. And that either makes you want to be better or you become jealous of that person. So that's what I'm going to say when it comes to a job, because you're all working at the same level, it's really hard to progress. And when it's hard to progress, you start competing with people and doing anything you can to progress, rather than working with people that are like-minded. The next thing that I'm going to say, which I may have already said, but I'll say it again, and this will be the last thing. So you know, for example, when you're in a job for so long, and then you're hoping to move on to another job, which promises you the stuff that you want, but then they don't accept you, and you're not 100% sure if they accept you until you leave the job that you're in. So that's one thing that I want you to pay attention to, because you shouldn't leave the job that you're in now hoping that you'll find another one straight away. But instead, you should stay in the job that you have now as a backup plan, so that when you look into another one, you're then more likely to get it because you're not desperate. You're at least taking the time with the applications. And not only that, you're applying yourself in the best way possible. When you're in a job for so long, you start to lose the passion that you had near the beginning. And that's what I'm going to say, because you start to lose the passion that you had. You start seeing the same people every single day. So that's why the people that you talk to is very important, no matter what work environment you're in. Because that's why I don't get it. People are in jobs where they don't talk to people at all. And that's one thing that really bothers me, because I'm not the most talkative person, but I still want to talk to people. So that's what I'm going to say, because if you don't talk to people and all you're just giving is a service, you're not really going to have a connection with people. And then also you're going to feel like you don't have a positive impact. But that's just really my thought process. And you can let me know your thoughts. I'll leave the video as that, because I feel like the job that I'm in now is much better than my previous work experience. So I don't really have much to say about being dissatisfied. But in terms of being satisfied, I can do that in another video.